So this is also something new that we've added this year. We haven't talked a lot about politics in the past. Anna Berger, the Senior Director of Operations at the South Carolina Association of Counties, is going to share a few slides with us. And then we're going to chat a little bit with her and with former Representative Mandy Norrell. She was South Carolina House District 44, which is Lancaster. And she's also an attorney and partner at Norrell and Norrell Attorneys at Law. And I'm going to let Anna go ahead and start with her presentation. And then there'll be a chance. I'll pose some questions, but we would love for you to be interactive and ask some questions as well. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, good afternoon. It's very much an honor to be amongst strong, powerful leaders. So thank you for taking time to be here today. Thank you for sharing your experiences and networking and learning from each other. It's an honor, obviously, to share the stage with Mandy Norrell. And so thank you for allowing me to be here. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge our clerks to council. I know that some of them have been on the agenda today. I started out with the University of South Carolina in 1997, worked there 15 years, and I got to learn a lot about local government by working with the municipal clerks group as well as the county clerks. So I learned a lot in that regard. 15 years later, I went to join the county association. I've been there 10 years and very, very blessed to be able to continue that relationship with our elected local leaders, but certainly our clerks to council. They are rock stars. So I just wanted to make sure we give a shout out. I think a question was raised earlier about where to find information on boards and commissions. Absolutely your county and city or town website, but and I'm sure Will has this information available, but also make sure the legislative manual is updated each year. So if you go to scstatehouse.gov, search for legislative manual, you will be able to see all the state boards and commissions. That information link is also available on the governor's website, but also the South Carolina Secretary of State has a searchable database for state boards and commissions. So I encourage you to check out that resource if you haven't. Just a few things I wanted to mention today, maybe to frame our discussion, if you will, is, make sure I'm on, there we go. And our previous panelists talked about this, but really contemplate and think about, why are you looking to serve on a board or a commission, right? What is drawing you to do that? Is it a passion for public service? If so, that excites me because I love people that are passionate about public service. If it's to build your resume, gain experience, that's great too. Nothing wrong with that. But think about and have that plan like our previous panelists talked about. Are you interested in running for public office down the road? If so, I say, yay, we need strong female leaders to do that. And but keep that in mind as you think about what's driving you to want to serve, because it is very, very important to have those things clearly defined. And you want to be able to articulate that, right? So when you have the conversation with your council member, you can be able to communicate why it's important for you, why you're interested in this particular board or commission. Something to keep in mind. And then what are your gifts? What are your skills or your experiences that you can bring to the table? And you want to make sure you tweak your resume to kind of put you in that position that'll help you articulate, kind of like if you're applying for a job, as we talked about earlier. So after you've really given some careful consideration as to why you're interested in serving, I would encourage you to identify 2 or 3 different boards or commissions that would be of interest to you and that you would match well with, and start to do your homework. We've talked about resources today. If it's a local board or commission, certainly contact your clerk to council. Reach out if you don't already have a relationship with your local council member or town council member. Now's the time to start that. Open those lines of communication, express your interest, and get to know more about the way the appointments to those local boards and commissions are handled. Is it done by council district? Is it done at large? Those are very, very important to know so that you know going in, which seats are available, what are the terms, are they staggered? If it's by district, when is your district up again, if you will, so you kind of plan your strategy accordingly, something to keep in mind. Also read enabling legislation, whether that's state law that spells out requirements for planning commissions, for example, or whether it's local ordinances. And your local ordinances, I believe if not in all 46, it should be in a vast majority of our counties, have those ordinances online and easily searchable. And if not, pick up the phone or email your clerk to council. And I say she because it's across the board. Our clerks to councils are there to help you and to provide resources to you and help you along the way. One thing also to keep in mind is if the appointments are done at large, meaning any council member can bring forth recommendations, sometimes a local government may have a rule in place where they say, okay, last time Sarah made the recommendation, next time we're going to let council member Jan make the recommendation. So you have to know kind of how things work in order to really capitalize on your timing and your method of reaching out. A couple simple strategies, I'm sure they've been addressed today, but go ahead for those 2 or 3 that you find interesting in terms of your homework phase, start attending meetings, look at their minutes and agendas, make yourself known, be there, ask questions. Now don't be the crazy Frank in every county that comes to every council meeting and causes drama, but certainly be there, be productive, be contributing, ask thoughtful questions. That's a way for you to become recognized. So something to think about. Follow the board or commission or the county or city on social media. See if they're active, what they're posting, how are they engaging with the community is something you may find interesting. I would also encourage you to check your social media. As I tell my children who are 20 and 17, if Susie from church looks at your Instagram and Snapchat accounts, what is Susie gonna think, right? And so over the last few years, I think all of us can recognize that the political divide has gotten much bigger. And so we have certain folks who are on the fringes of either side, and they make their opinions and their push for policy decisions and changes very, very vocally and in the face oftentimes of people. If you are one of those people, I would just encourage you to think about that and think about, is that something you're so passionate about to continue doing that if that's your cup of tea, but realize that may rub against what council members or your contacts with the state legislature might want to be representative on this board or commission. So just something to think about, be self-reflective, ask someone to check it out for you if you're not sure. But I think those folks on the fringes, we've got enough of that already. And so try and be productive. How can we engage? What is your passion? And how can we make progress? So some things to consider on social media. Talk with your council member. If you don't know your council member, I would encourage you to do that today. Begin building those relationships. And I think it will pay dividends for you. Now, our former representative can certainly speak to this better than I can, but our town and county council members and our state legislators can't walk across a room without getting 5 requests. Okay, so if you multiply that every time they're home in their local district or jurisdiction, when they go out to eat, when they go to the ballpark, when they go to the grocery store, they're bombarded, right? So you want to make it as easy as possible for your elected official. And so I would encourage you after that conversation, follow up in writing with an email or a handwritten note, remind them of the conversation and make sure you include your ask, right? So I am interested in this particular board or commission and would appreciate your support in recommending me to fill this slot. So make it easy for your elected official. And by all means, please copy the clerk to council. Okay. She will make sure it gets to where it needs to be. So just some simple, hopefully, advice there. Now, the title of our talk today is kind of the politics in boards and commissions, and whether you're talking big P politics or little p politics, they're everywhere. Things go on behind the scenes that we have no idea. I watched intently or listened intently last week when the legislature was debating a couple bills that the counties are very interested in. And I thought to myself, I'm hearing the person at the well, but there's about 18 different discussions going on in the lobby or at the back of the house that we never know about, right? And so there's deals are being made. People are having to concede certain things in order to get their interest and their bill forward. So that happens on the local level too. May not be very obvious to folks, but if we understand kind of the way that works and maybe have some more realistic expectations, one thing that was mentioned earlier is this process can be slow as molasses. Okay. You guys are here because you're dynamite, you're on top of stuff, and you get things done. That's not always the case. And it's heart-wrenching when you are asking to be considered for an appointment and it seems like it's taking 9 months, right? But don't give up. Keep asking, keep following up, stay committed and determined. A couple other things to think about. The council member that you're speaking with may have already committed to support someone else. Okay, he or she may not be honest with you at first, but know those things take place from time to time. Know also that you wouldn't think something as simple as a board or commission recommendation would be in play with big political decisions, but they can from time to time. So as a council member, I may have to concede on really pushing you as my recommendation to give Larry his vote that he needs. So those things happen day in and day out, and they can be very frustrating to those of us that aren't politicians. Understanding that if you have a very different view, a political view and perspective on life than your council member does, just know that could come into play as well. Although it shouldn't, those things are probably the way we might handle it as well. And last but not least, thank your council member for his or her consideration. That's one thing we try and teach our county officials is thank your legislator. Even if they couldn't vote on the bill you wanted, you still thank them. And it's about relationships, right? You go to the well one time, if you get told no, you have to keep going back. And so you need to have a good relationship to be able to go back and ask those questions. So some things to think about, don't give up. Consider sharing your feedback with other dynamic leaders who are interested in getting involved. Also consider sharing your feedback on the process with either the local government or the Christie at the governor's office. God bless her. I don't know how she does what she does, but we've waited 18 months on an appointment, you know, and so there's all kind of things at play that we don't see on our end. But anyway, I hope those were some helpful tips. I think we're going to turn it over to Q&A. And so I will let Sarah start.
Some of the appointments that you've been involved in as a legislator, and just sort of how does, I mean, we all like to believe politics doesn't play into it, but we know that that's not the case. So.
I don't even try to believe that. It definitely does. There are several types of appointments that we would be involved in. In the legislature, there were delegation appointments where the delegation of a county or an area would recommend to the governor, like foster care review board. And then there were gubernatorial appointments and then legislative appointments. There are some that the legislature would vote on, like college boards and judiciary. And on the college boards, we could trade votes. On judiciary, we couldn't, because that's illegal to say, if you concede this to me, if you give me my person, I'll vote for your person. We could do that on college boards. And there are some colleges that are very, very competitive to be on the board of, like USC and Clemson And in fact, there was one trustee for Clemson who was at the legislature every single day of session. Like everybody knows him. He hangs out like all day. We love him. PSC is another one. And PSC is one that Public Service Commission, it pays pretty well. So the people who want that will come around a good bit. And there was one guy I remember who was running for PSC. We saw him about a year before the vote. And he just, like I nicknamed him the creeper because I'd be in a conversation with somebody and he's just like right here, just like hovering. So I would say, don't be the creeper. Don't be the creeper. And because by the time it came down to like time to vote, I knew him, but I knew him in a way that said, I don't want to vote for him. I don't want to see him anymore, really. And I mean, that was just like my just feeling about him. And so I wanted to know who his opponent was and made it my business to see if I liked her, because I was more inclined. But so those are, just there's several, the foster care review board, the ones where you just the legislature doesn't have to vote on it like they do on college boards and commissions and judiciary. Those are a lot easier to get on. They're probably a lot more thankless, a lot fewer perks, no pay. And so we always had vacancies. The Secretary of State has a list of just vacancies that goes on and on for pages. And some of those vacancies may be what's called holdovers, where the governor just, their term has expired, but the person serving just continues to serve in that role until the governor appoints somebody else. That gives the governor great power, because if you have staggered terms, but everybody on a board or commission is a holdover and it's all gubernatorial appointment, the governor can just wipe it out and start completely fresh with everybody, even though they would otherwise have staggered terms, because everybody's term has expired. So, so that's something, if you're looking at something with a lot of vacancies, they may be being held by holdovers. And so it might not be an actual vacancy.
Got it. So, and I guess I'm not really sure how to approach this. I mean, the process gets, I guess, ever more complicated as you get into the higher seats. So, what can you say about, appointment by the governor versus delegations versus, the way to sort of navigate that process?
It really depends on the board or commission that you're interested in and how much other interest there is. But if you want to be appointed to a gubernatorially appointed seat, then you contact the governor's office, the ombudsman, and say, I'm really interested in this seat. I would like to be considered for it, and just kind of start that process, and the squeaky wheel gets the grease. But make sure that you have a relationship with your own representative and senator, and who can also let the governor know that they're interested in making sure that you get that seat, because the governor is going to need them in a bill that comes later. And so if your senator or representative are interested in you getting that position, then it's a lot more likely that the governor is going to, his office, not the governor himself, but his office is going to move on it.
Since we're talking about politics, is it beneficial and or detrimental to have involvement with like your political party that you affiliate with?
If it's the party in power, yes.
That's why I say beneficial or
yeah,
detrimental.
Yeah, if it's the party in power, it can be very beneficial. But even if it's not the party in power, there are people think that we're a lot more divided than we are. We are more divided now than we were 2 years ago. We're more divided, much more than we were 4 years ago, but we still get along pretty well. And even though, honestly, Democrats and Republicans try to keep that a secret from their base at the state level, because your base gets you elected. Your base, the people who show up to vote in the primaries, they are the extremes of your party. You really don't want them to know that you get along with the other side. And so that's why the average person just doesn't know this, but they do. They get along well. I am very comfortable contacting the governor's office as a Democrat, and it's it's not something that I see as a detriment to be known as a Democrat. But the another person who's just active in the party who they don't have like a personal relationship to, it could be, but if you have your representative and they're not the party in power and they're making a call for you to the governor's office, it's almost never a bad thing unless they have had some kind of beef.
Right. In terms of there being multiple applications for the same position, what sets people apart? I mean, what do you know? I mean, certainly we've talked a lot about networking and those sorts of things, but in terms of qualifications and that angle.
Relationships. I mean, I come from Lancaster. I come from a family that had absolutely no political relationships. Both my parents worked for Springs Mills, and I came through and just went to college and law school, and then I think that I just started showing up at city council meetings, and they were pretty boring, and I'd be the only person in the audience. And then they started, what's that girl doing? What's she here for? And then they thought maybe she's going to run against Paul T. Beckham. And he was this old man that represented my neighborhood on city council. So he comes to me and he's like, when you finish law school, I'll make sure you're the city attorney if you promise not to run against me. And I was like, wow, I hadn't thought about it. That's a good idea. And so, so I became city attorney, and that was like 25 years ago. And so it was, just the beginnings of relationships, but I would say like real relationships, like not going into something with the intent of saying, I'm going to connect with you so that you can later help me, because they know when you're doing that and it's not authentic and it's not real, and it just feels kind of icky to like when I was a legislator, and I could feel who was like more interested in like a relationship, like a friendship, socializing than in somebody who was on and trying to get my attention for the moment. And so it's not like you said, go to the grocery store. And I always felt like I was walking through like a jungle and all these little animals were jumping on me, and I'd peel them off and kind of drop them and talk to them. I'd be like, yeah. And then, but another animal would jump on me, and you're just exhausted by the time you get home with your groceries. And so if you approach your representative not to say, hey, I want this appointment, I'm really interested in this, I'm really interested, just kind of, if you thank them because they're not getting a lot of thanks, if you say, how are you doing, how's the family, that can just having a conversation is so much better than having that first contact be an ask.
And then does it feel genuine to then follow up with, it was nice to see, like a written note. It was nice to see you at the grocery store and hear about whatever. I'm interested in this.
I loved that. When I would get something handwritten in my office, it cut through everything, because I thought this person took the time to actually, send me something on paper, handwritten. It's just nice. So, I mean, that's me. Other people may feel differently, but that's how I felt when somebody took that time.
And it didn't make you look back at the grocery store conversation like, oh, they didn't really care about my family.
Maybe have two grocery store conversations before you make an ask. Maybe have a, or something. Because I mean, even now there's Facebook Messenger. Hey, how are you doing? I hope you're doing great. I see Emma is, still drumming. Anyway, by the way, I was thinking maybe you could help me. And it's just like, it drains your energy. But if you can be like, hey, how are you doing? I hope you're doing great. It's been a long time. Just any kind of thing that doesn't involve now let me pull something out of you.
Or even pointing out your experience. I mean, maybe not just the ask, but like, hey, I'm, here's why I'm interested in the School for the Deaf and Blind.
Could I ask your advice on something? That's always something that make them feel helpful. Because then it's like, yes, let me give my advice. Let me be helpful in a way that isn't as draining. And so that's a good thing. But just yeah, I mean, I don't think, and two, I mean, they're there to help. If there was ever something that somebody needed from me that I could help with, I was always excited to do it. But I'm just, when you get 5 of those in an hour, it just starts wearing at you. And I have this fear that I'm going to forget things. And so I'm just always like, oh my gosh, what if I'm supposed to help this person? I tell them I'm going to help them. And then I get back to my office and I've totally forgotten about it, even the interaction. Then, I would have a fear of that. So, if you could say, what's the best way to contact you? Should I send you a text to follow up to make sure that, that you have my contact or that you remember what we talked about or something like that. But, I'm not saying don't ask, but I would say these legislators, these people who have the ability to make these appointments, they do want to be your friend. They do want to have a genuine, authentic relationship with good people. And
Anna, and you work more with counties. Do you feel like do county and more local representatives get the same kind of pull as a state level representative?
I do think they do, yeah. And although they represent the same constituents, I think that some of the local elected officials are seen more frequently and really can't hide. Not that they want to, but I do think that they do have probably more opportunities, if you want to look at it that way, to interact with citizens and in a natural setting. But I think Mandy's point's well taken. Try and build those relationships now and figure out your plan for down the road as to when's the best time to ask, is to keep those things in mind.
Do you think that there's as much negotiation with conceding something for appointments at a county or local level?
I don't know that it would be as strong as it is at the State House. There may be things at play, but I don't know that usually you would find someone having to concede their recommendation, but it may happen.
Gotcha. Are there any questions from the audience about the political perspective? Thank you. Well, this has been extremely insightful.
I was going to say one thing at the municipal level. I've been a city attorney for Lancaster, He Springs, and Kershaw, and they're really they're looking for people to serve. We would so often have a council meeting where they would say, "Oh, we need somebody for the planning commission. Anybody have a recommendation?" And they look down the table. And
Someone.
say, well, next week or next meeting, can somebody have a recommendation? And then the next meeting comes and they're like, oh, I forgot. I was going to ask so-and-so and I forgot to ask them. And they go on and on for, months of meetings where they're saying, does anybody have a recommendation? And so, I mean, that's like the opposite of what we're talking about when things
By asking,
are,
you're almost being helpful.
right. If you have told your councilman at that point, that's like, hey, if anything comes up, I'd be interested in being considered, then they're going to be the hero at that council meeting. Like, hey, I know somebody who's interested in serving in some capacity. So they're not always competitive at all.
Very good. Thank you. And we want to acknowledge again the folks that are at home. Thank you for hanging with us. I hope that this has been helpful for you. And we're glad that you're able to join us from wherever you may be this afternoon. So we are really excited about our last session. Ladies, thank you so much.